AITA for ending my engagement after my fiancée said she was marrying me only because I pay on time? I'm Luis, 36, and at the time, I had been engaged to Aubrey for 10 months after being together for 4 years. 4 years is long enough to build the kind of familiarity that makes you stop noticing how much of your life is organized around another person. I knew she took her coffee with too much cream when she was tired and almost none when she was stressed. She always stole the same blanket during movies, even when there were 2 on the couch. She hated making phone calls to fix billing mistakes, so I usually handled those. She remembered birthdays better than I did and could turn a bad Saturday into a good one with takeout and a ridiculous movie. We weren't miserable. That's part of why I stayed blind to certain things. I had always been the practical one. I wasn't concerned with the appearance of success. I was focused on not carrying a balance I couldn't pay, showing up when I said I would, and knowing the true cost of things before committing. Aubrey liked those qualities when they made her life easier. She called me dependable, grounded, safe. Her family used the same words, but over time, I realized they didn't always mean them as compliments. Janine, Aubrey's mother, was 61 and deeply concerned with appearances, not in a cartoonish way where everything had to be a designer label, but in the constant, exhausting way of someone who always seemed to be imagining what other people might say later. She cared about the restaurant people saw you at, whether a gift looked cheap when opened in front of relatives, and whether a wedding looked proper in photographs. Howard, Aubrey's father, was 63 and quieter, but he had his own philosophy about money. His favorite phrase was that a man should know how to carry weight. The first few times he said things like that, I took it as old school talk about responsibility. I was trying to become part of the family, so I let a lot of comments slide. Once, after I declined an expensive weekend trip because the dates didn't work for me, Janine said, "That's Luis." Sensible to a fault. Another time, one of Aubrey's cousins brought a flashy new car to a holiday gathering. Howard spent 10 minutes admiring it, then looked at my older car and said, "At least yours is paid for." Everybody laughed. I laughed too. I told myself they were just different from me. I told myself that people who cared more about appearances weren't necessarily bad people. I also told myself that once Aubrey and I were married, the little jabs would matter less because I would know where I stood. That was probably my biggest mistake. I thought respect was something I could earn through consistency. When we got engaged, Aubrey and I agreed early on that we didn't want to start married life fighting over wedding debt. We set up a dedicated wedding account to collect what we each contributed. I put money in regularly. Aubrey did too, though not as much because our circumstances were different, and that didn't bother me. Janine and Howard insisted that they would cover several major pieces of the wedding. Janine was especially vocal about it. "This is our daughter," she said. "We're not going to have people thinking you paid for everything." That sentence should have sounded strange to me. At the time, I heard pride. Later, I understood there was something else in it. The venue required a card to hold the date and secure certain scheduled payments. I used mine because it was easy. The caterer was similar. A hotel block needed a guarantee. I put my card down there too. Aubrey told me it was temporary because her parents were going to handle much of the final cost. "Once Mom moves their money over, we'll switch everything," she said. I believed her. The wedding planning became far more elaborate than I'd expected. Every time I suggested trimming the budget, Janine acted like I had proposed serving crackers in a parking lot. When I asked whether we really needed the upgraded open bar, she said, "People remember when you cut corners." When I suggested reducing some extra decor, she said, "This is a wedding, Luis, not a quarterly budget meeting." Aubrey would give me a tired look afterward and say, "Can we just get through this? She's already stressed." So I would back off. Then I started noticing small things that didn't add up. The balance in our wedding account seemed lower than it should have been. The first time I mentioned it, Aubrey said a few deposits had cleared. I asked which ones. She was opening mail at the counter and didn't look up. I don't remember exactly. I'll check. She never did. A few weeks later, I asked again. She told me not to obsess over the account because her parents were covering most of the remaining costs anyway. "After the wedding, we can go back to being boring about money," she said, smiling like it was affectionate. I let that one go too. Around the same time, Trevor started showing up more often. Trevor was Aubrey's 29-year-old brother. I never hated the guy. He could be funny and easy to talk to, but he had a long history of turning short-term problems into family emergencies. There was always some bill that had surprised him, some plan that had fallen through, some amount he was definitely going to repay once something else worked out. Janine and Howard complained about helping him while continuing to help him. Aubrey defended him more than she admitted. He's trying, she would say. Maybe he was, but trying never seemed to keep other people's money out of his problems. For about a month before the dinner, he was suddenly at Janine and Howard's place a lot. If I arrived, he often left within 20 minutes. I noticed it because it happened 3 times, but there was never enough there to accuse anyone of anything. Once, I asked Aubrey if Trevor was in trouble again. She said, "Not our problem." The answer came so quickly that I remember looking at her. She added, "I mean, not something we need to get involved in." I wanted to believe that, so I did. The engagement dinner had been Aubrey's idea. It wasn't a formal family event. It was mostly her close friends, a few people I knew well enough to talk to, drinks, shared appetizers, and the kind of teasing people do when a couple is getting married. Aubrey had been drinking, but she wasn't falling down drunk. She knew who she was talking to. She knew I was sitting there. Before the comment that sent me out the door, there had been a few smaller jokes. One of her friends teased her about how I always checked reservation times and confirmed plans. Another said I was the only person she knew who paid people back before they remembered they were owed money. Aubrey laughed. Then she turned me from a person into the punchline. What bothered me most wasn't even the first second of laughter. People sometimes laugh because everyone else is laughing. It was what happened after. Aubrey looked pleased with herself. Leah looked down. Another friend said, "That's terrible," while still smiling. Aubrey shrugged and said, "You know what I mean." I did. I also knew that if I stayed, I was either going to say something ugly or sit there pretending it was fine. Neither felt useful. So I paid for what I had ordered. I didn't pick up Aubrey's portion. I didn't cover the table. I left. Outside, Aubrey caught up with me just long enough to ask, "Are you seriously doing this right now?" I told her, "I'm going home." Over a joke? I heard the joke. You know I didn't mean it like that. I looked at her for a second and asked, "How did you mean it?" She folded her arms. "Oh my God, Luis." That was when I told her she was about to find out what the wedding budget looked like without me. I didn't have a full plan when I said it. I was angry, and I knew that. But I also knew I was done sitting in a restaurant while the woman I was supposed to marry explained my value like I was an automatic payment feature. The call started before I even got home. Aubrey called twice. I didn't answer. Then she texted, "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." A minute later, "Everyone thinks you're being insane." Then, "Please don't make this bigger than it is." Janine texted next. "Luis, leaving Aubrey at that table was unacceptable. Whatever joke was made, you do not humiliate your future wife in front of her friends." Not one person in Aubrey's family asked what had been said to me. The question wasn't whether I was hurt. The problem was that I had stopped playing my part in public. Howard sent a shorter message. "A man does not walk out when things get uncomfortable." That one almost made me laugh. I put my phone face down and made myself do nothing for a while. A little before midnight, it buzzed again. This time it was Leah. Her message said, "I'm sorry I laughed. I shouldn't have. There's something else you should see." Then she sent me 2 screenshots from a conversation she had had with Aubrey a few weeks earlier. The first one wasn't about the wedding money. It was about me. Leah had apparently asked Aubrey why she kept letting her mother compare me to other men. Aubrey had replied, "Luis is stable enough to marry, not impressive enough to show off." That sounds mean, but you know what I mean. Leah had answered, "Does Luis know you talk about him like that?" Aubrey, "He doesn't care about that stuff. That's why it works." I read those 3 lines several times. Then I opened the second screenshot. The conversation had shifted to wedding expenses. Aubrey complained that things were tight again and that her mother was panicking about final balances. Leah asked why. Aubrey replied, "Trevor needed help. It was temporary." Leah, "From the wedding money?" Aubrey, "It's fine. Luis will cover it because he always does. He doesn't even know yet." There was more after that, mostly Leah telling her it was a bad idea and Aubrey saying she would fix it before I had to know. Leah hadn't sent me a complete explanation. She had sent me enough to make me stop wondering if the restaurant comment was an isolated, drunken joke. I texted her one question. "How much?" She replied, "I don't know. She never told me." I thanked her and didn't ask for anything else. For the first time that night, I opened the wedding account. The number on the screen looked wrong immediately. I pulled up the recent activity. A few normal charges were there. A deposit, a vendor payment. Then I saw a transfer I didn't recognize. $9,800. Recipient, Trevor. Memo, temporary help. I just sat there looking at it. There is a very specific kind of anger that doesn't feel hot. It feels administrative. I didn't throw anything. I didn't call Aubrey. I started opening statements. The transfer had happened weeks earlier, before one of the times I asked why the account was lower than expected. Aubrey hadn't forgotten to mention it. She had looked me in the face after it happened and told me deposits were clearing. I opened my email and searched for the venue's name. That was when the second problem became obvious. The venue had been emailing me because my card was still the payment method on file for future balances. So was the caterer. So was the hotel block. So was the upgraded bar package. A florist email had a note about an upcoming balance that Aubrey had told me Janine was handling. I opened the actual payment authorizations I had signed. Some were just card guarantees. Some allowed scheduled charges if the balance wasn't replaced by another payment method by a certain date. Those dates were close. Suddenly, Janine's confidence about how much they were paying for made sense. Their money didn't need to arrive on time as long as my card did. I slept badly and woke up angry enough that I almost started canceling things from bed. Instead, I called Damon. Damon is 37 and has been my closest friend long enough to know when I'm about to do something satisfying and stupid. I told him what had happened, including the dinner, the screenshots, the transfer, and the vendor emails. His first response was, "Do not touch anything until you know what you've signed." That annoyed me because it was the right answer. "I'm not paying for this wedding," I said. "I didn't say you should." She moved almost 10 grand to her brother. "I heard you. I'm saying know the difference between removing your card and creating a mess you're still contractually attached to." I was quiet. Then he said, "You can be furious tomorrow too. Today, get the facts." So I did. I downloaded the wedding account statements. I saved the screenshots Leah had sent. I made a simple list of every vendor, what had already been paid, what was non-refundable, whose name was on the contract, and whether my card was being held for future charges. It took most of the morning. The more I checked, the less the situation looked like one bad decision. It looked like a system built around the assumption that I would close the gap. That afternoon, Aubrey came over. She looked exhausted and angry. She didn't apologize when she walked in. Instead, she said, "Can we please talk like adults now?" I almost pointed out that I had managed to leave a restaurant without screaming at anyone, which was apparently more adult behavior than publicly insulting your fiancé, but I didn't. I asked her to sit down. Then I said, "Did you transfer $9,800 from the wedding account to Trevor?" She went still. Not confused. Not surprised. Still. Why are you looking through everything like I'm a criminal? That's not an answer. It was an emergency. How much did you send him? You obviously know. I want to hear you say it. She rubbed her forehead. $9,800. Did you tell me? I was going to. When? After things calmed down. What things? My mom. Trevor. The wedding. Everything. I asked whether Trevor was paying it back before the final balances were due. Her eyes moved away from mine. He's supposed to. That's not what I asked. I don't know, okay? Then she said the sentence that ended more of our relationship than she understood at the time. I was going to tell you after the wedding if I had to. I stared at her. After the wedding? Because you would have made it a huge issue right now. It is a huge issue right now. It was my brother. It was our wedding account. He needed help. And you decided I would replace it. She stood up. I did not decide that. I pulled out my phone and read her own message back to her. Luis will cover it because he always does. He doesn't even know yet. Her face changed. Leah sent you that. Yes. That is unbelievable. I actually laughed once. Because of all the things to be angry about, she chose Leah. You transferred $9,800 behind my back, lied when I asked about the balance, and planned for me to cover it. But Leah is unbelievable. She had no right to send private messages. You had no right to make a private plan for my money. It wasn't your money. It was the wedding fund. It was our money for a specific purpose. She crossed her arms. You always do this. Do what? Turn everything into rules and numbers. This is literally about money. No, this is about you feeling disrespected at dinner and now trying to punish me. I let that sit for a second. Then I asked, why did you tell Leah I'm stable enough to marry, but not impressive enough to show off? She looked more tired than guilty. You know how my mom is. You know the kind of comments my friends make. I was venting. About me. I said it badly. You said it more than once. I love you. I believe that she believed that. That was the hardest part. I don't think Aubrey spent 4 years pretending every moment. I don't think she woke up each morning plotting how to drain me. I think she loved what our relationship gave her. I think she loved parts of me. I also think she had gotten comfortable treating my reliability as a utility. She trusted me to be there. She didn't respect what it cost me to always be the person who was there. I asked her about the vendor balances. She said her parents were still going to pay their share. When? Soon. Before the scheduled charges hit my card? They're working on it. Why are they telling everyone they're paying for the wedding? Her mouth tightened. Who told you that? I've heard your mother say it. Your aunt thanked Howard for giving his daughter a beautiful wedding. Your parents have never corrected anyone. This is what you're upset about now. I'm asking if they are actually covering what they said they would. They will. When? I don't know. That answer told me enough. Aubrey kept trying to drag the conversation back to the restaurant because the restaurant was easier to defend. One bad joke. One embarrassing moment. One oversensitive fiancé. The bank transfer was harder. The vendor authorizations were harder. The private messages were the hardest. Finally, she said, what do you want me to do? Take the money back from Trevor today? He doesn't have it. I said, I want you to understand that I'm not covering it. Her expression changed from defensive to alarmed. What does that mean? It means I'm removing my card from every future payment I can legally remove it from. You can't do that. I can. I checked. You already agreed to pay. I agreed to use my card while we funded the wedding together and your parents moved their part over. That is not what is happening. Luis, the balances are due. I know. My mom is going to lose her mind. That is not a financial plan. She started crying then. Not dramatically. She sat down and covered her face for a few seconds. Part of me wanted to go sit next to her. That reflex was so automatic it scared me. For 4 years, Aubrey being overwhelmed had been a signal for me to step in. Fix the bill. Make the call. Smooth out the problem. Tell her we would figure it out. I stayed where I was. After a while, she looked at me and said, You're really going to wreck the wedding over this? I said, The joke didn't empty the account. The joke made me look. She left without saying goodbye. Over the next 2 days, I contacted every vendor where my card was being used for future charges. I was careful. I didn't call anyone and say, destroy my fiancé's wedding. I asked what I was contractually responsible for, what had already been earned by the vendor, what was non-refundable, and what could be changed. Where I was legally committed, I accepted that. Where my card was just the payment method on file, I removed it. I canceled the open bar upgrade that I had personally added and authorized. I released the hotel block guarantee tied to my card after confirming the deadline and terms. Guests could still book rooms, but I was no longer guaranteeing and used rooms. I removed a decor upgrade I had agreed to pay for. For the venue and caterer, I gave written notice that no future charges were authorized on my card unless I personally approved them. I didn't dispute legitimate deposits that had already been paid. I didn't try to claw back money vendors had earned. I knew I was going to lose part of what I had already put down, and I accepted that. That was the price of finding out before the wedding instead of after it. I also sent Aubrey a short email listing what I had changed. No insults. No threats. I told her that any remaining balances would need to be paid by her, her parents, or another payment method they authorized. Janine called me within 20 minutes. I answered because by then, I had everything in front of me. What have you done? She demanded. I removed my card from future charges. You are embarrassing both families. I thought your family was paying for most of the wedding. There was a pause. That is not the point. It seems related. This is not how a man treats the woman he says he loves. I said, if your family is hosting, why does my card matter? Her voice got sharper. You are being spiteful. I'm not stopping you from paying for anything. You know perfectly well final balances are coming due. Yes. And you choose now to pull this? I chose now because I just found out $9,800 was taken from the wedding account without my knowledge. Janine went quiet. Not surprised. That mattered. I asked, you knew? She said, Trevor had an emergency. That was not my question. He is Aubrey's brother. You knew? A family does not abandon one of its own over money. I said, apparently it just borrows from another one without asking. She told me I was cruel and hung up. Howard called later. He was calmer, which somehow made the pressure more obvious. A man who wants to join a family should know how to carry one, he said. I had heard the line before. This time, I heard the invoice inside it. I was marrying Aubrey, I said. I was not applying to become your family's emergency fund. That is a cheap way to describe helping people. Then help Trevor. He sighed. You're making a permanent decision while angry. I'm making a decision about payments while I figure out if this marriage is still happening. The wedding is too close for games. I agree. He didn't like that answer. By the end of the week, Aubrey had told several people that I was threatening to cancel the wedding because she made one joke. I know because two mutual friends contacted me. One asked if I really wanted to throw away 4 years over one drunk comment. Another told me I needed to stop using money to control Aubrey. That accusation bothered me more than I expected. I spent an evening asking myself if they were right. I had more financial leverage than Aubrey at that moment. Removing my card created immediate pressure. I knew that. I wasn't pretending otherwise. But there was a difference between using money to control someone and refusing to let someone use your money while lying to you. Still, I didn't love how easily those two things could look alike from the outside. That was when Aubrey asked me to come to her parents' house for a conversation. She said, we need to talk like adults with everyone there so this doesn't keep getting twisted. I almost refused. Then I learned that everyone included Janine, Howard, Trevor, and a few of Aubrey's close friends, including Leah. Aubrey had already told those people I was punishing her over the restaurant comment. If she wanted an audience for her version, I decided I wasn't going to hide the other half of the story. Damon told me to bring copies, not speeches. Don't go there trying to win, he said. Go there knowing what you'll do when they don't agree with you. That turned out to be useful advice. The meeting was on a Saturday afternoon in Janine and Howard's living room. Trevor was sitting in a chair near the far wall when I walked in. He wouldn't look at me. Leah looked uncomfortable. Aubrey was on the couch next to her mother. Janine started before I had fully sat down. We are not here to attack anyone. That is usually a bad sign. We are here because two people who love each other should not destroy a future over pride. I said, okay. Aubrey looked at me. Her eyes were tired. It was one bad joke, she said. I have apologized for how it sounded. She hadn't actually apologized to me yet, but I let that go. She continued. Luis left me at the restaurant, went home, started going through our accounts, and then pulled his card from the wedding without even giving me a chance to fix anything. He is burning down our future because I embarrassed him. One of her friends nodded. Janine added, a wedding is not the time to keep score. I asked, can I respond? Howard said, that is why you are here. So I took out the first page. It was the wedding account statement. I set it on the coffee table. This is the account we used for wedding money. This is the $9,800 transfer to Trevor. Trevor stared at the floor. Aubrey said, we already discussed that. I looked at the other people in the room. Did everyone here know about it? Nobody answered. One friend looked at Aubrey. I placed the next page down. This transfer happened before I asked Aubrey why the account balance was lower than expected. She told me deposits were clearing. That was not true. Aubrey leaned forward. I said I was going to replace it. No. You said Trevor was supposed to pay it back. He is. Trevor finally spoke. I said I would. I looked at him. Before the vendor balances are due? He opened his mouth, then looked at Janine. That was answer enough. Janine stepped in. It was a family emergency. The money was sitting there. It was allocated. It was still available. To pay for the wedding. And this is exactly what I mean about keeping score. I put down the vendor emails next. These are the venue, caterer, hotel block, florist, and bar charges that were still tied to my card. Several were approaching final due dates. Aubrey said, My parents were paying for those. I asked, with what payment method? Janine said, we had arrangements. What arrangements? That is none of your business. I actually paused at that. The charges were going to my card. Howard shifted in his chair. I said, if your arrangements involve my card, they are my business. Aubrey looked at me with the expression she used when she thought I was being deliberately difficult. You knew your card was on file. Yes, I was told it was temporary. It was. For 10 months. No one was trying to steal from you. I said, then why did you tell Leah I would cover Trevor's money because I always do? That changed the room. Aubrey looked at Leah. Leah looked like she wished the couch would swallow her. Janine said, what private messages are you talking about? I had printed those too, but I didn't hand them around immediately. I read the relevant part. Trevor needed help. It was temporary. Then, Luis will cover it because he always does. He doesn't even know yet. Aubrey's face went red. She turned to Leah. You sent him that. Leah nodded. You had no right. Leah's voice was quiet. Maybe not. Aubrey stood up. I trusted you. Leah looked at her for a second and said, he trusted you. That was the first moment I saw Aubrey lose control of the version of events she had brought everyone there to hear. She pointed at me. This is what I mean. He's making me look like some kind of user because I helped my brother one time. I said no. The transfer is one issue. Then I read the other message. Luis is stable enough to marry, not impressive enough to show off. Aubrey closed her eyes. I continued. He doesn't care about that stuff. That's why it works. Janine immediately tried to move past it. People say careless things to friends. That is not a reason to destroy a marriage. We are not married. You know what I mean. Yes, I said. I do. Howard leaned forward with his hands clasped. Luis, nobody is saying this was handled perfectly. Aubrey should have told you. Trevor should not have needed the money. But you are acting as if no one intended to make it right. When what? When were you going to make it right? He frowned. When were you going to replace the $9,800 and move the remaining vendor charges off my card? Howard looked at Janine. Janine said, we were working on it. That is what Aubrey said. Because it is true. I asked, would it have been done before the final balances hit? Janine said, we would not have let the wedding fail. That is not an answer. Howard's patience finally cracked. Oh, come on, he said. You would have covered it anyway. The room got very quiet. Not a dramatic movie silence. Just the ordinary kind where several people suddenly stopped moving because they all heard the same thing. Howard realized it too. He tried to recover. I mean, if there had been a shortfall. You're the groom. I nodded. That's the point. He shook his head. No, you are twisting my words. I don't need to. Janine cut in. So what? A husband helps his wife. A son-in-law helps his family. A husband gets told when $9,800 leaves a joint wedding account. Aubrey made a mistake. Aubrey made a plan. Aubrey said, stop talking about me like I'm not here. I looked at her. Then tell me I'm wrong. She was crying now, but angry too. My brother was in trouble. My parents were panicking about the wedding. Every conversation was about how embarrassing it would be if we cut something or changed something. You were already complaining about costs. I thought if I could get Trevor through his problem and keep the wedding moving, I could fix it before you needed to know. That is not fixing it. I know that now. You knew I would say no. Yes. That answer landed harder than all the excuses. Because there it was. She didn't hide it because she thought I would agree. She hid it because she knew I would not. Janine said, sometimes you do what you have to do for family. I said, then you pay for it. She stared at me. I turned back to Aubrey. I need to ask you one thing. If I had never heard that comment at dinner, when would you have told me? She wiped her face. I don't know. Before the wedding? She didn't answer. After? I said I don't know. That was my answer. One of Aubrey's friends, the same one who had texted me about throwing away for years, looked down at the papers again. She asked Aubrey, did you really tell people your parents were covering most of this? Aubrey said, they were supposed to. Janine snapped, we have contributed. I said, I never said you contributed nothing. That mattered to me. I wasn't going to exaggerate just because the truth already favored me. They have paid for some things, I told the room. The problem is that they have also let people believe they were the primary reason this wedding could happen, while my card was guaranteeing a large part of what was still unpaid. Howard said, "Why do you care who gets credit?" I almost answered too quickly. Then I realized that question was the whole story. I didn't, I said, until I learned you wanted the credit and expected me to absorb the risk. Nobody had much to say to that. Leah spoke next. "I laughed at dinner," she said. "I regret it. I should have said something then." Aubrey stared at her. Leah continued, "But this was not just a joke. I sent Luis those messages because I knew about the Trevor thing and I knew he didn't. I thought Aubrey was actually going to tell him. When she made that joke in front of everyone, it sounded like she was bragging about the exact reason she thought she could get away with it." Aubrey said, "That is not fair." Leah nodded. "Maybe, but that's how it sounded." Janine called the whole thing an ambush, which was impressive considering they had invited me. Then Howard told me I was letting pride ruin a family. Trevor finally said, "This is my fault." For a second, everyone looked at him. He swallowed. I asked Aubrey for help. She said she could move money and replace it later. I didn't ask where it came from. I believe that part. He looked at me and said, "I knew it was wedding money after she sent it." "Did you know I didn't know?" He hesitated. "Yes." Janine immediately said, "Trevor, you do not need to sit here and be interrogated." I said, "I'm done interrogating anyone." Aubrey looked at me. "What does that mean?" It was the moment I had been avoiding for a week because saying it made everything irreversible. I took off my engagement ring. I had gotten used to wearing it. The skin underneath looked lighter. I set it on the table. "It means the engagement is over." Aubrey's face went blank. Janine said, "Luis." I kept looking at Aubrey. "I'm not funding anything else. My card stays off the vendor accounts. I'm not covering the missing $9,800. I'm not lying to relatives about why the money is short. And I'm not marrying into a situation where my reliability is treated like something everyone else gets to spend." Aubrey said, "You're really doing this here? You brought me here because you wanted everyone to hear why I was wrong. That doesn't mean you have to humiliate me." I understood the irony, but I didn't use it. I just said, "I'm not canceling your wedding. I'm canceling my role as the wallet in it." Janine stood up and told me to leave. So I did. The first practical consequence hit 3 days later. The venue needed a remaining balance under the original schedule. Without my card automatically covering it, Aubrey and her parents had to provide another payment method. They couldn't cover everything on the existing timeline. The caterer had a similar deadline. The wedding was postponed. That was the word Janine used when she called relatives. Postponed. It was easier than saying the engagement was over. A few people apparently believed we were taking a break. Aubrey didn't correct all of them right away. I didn't chase people down to update them. I had enough to deal with. I lost part of the money I had already paid. Some deposits were non-refundable. A few upgrades were canceled in time, but not everything could be recovered. I didn't enjoy losing that money, and I will admit there were moments when I looked at the amount and thought about how much easier it would have been to swallow my anger and keep moving forward. Then I would remember that doing so would have meant marrying someone who had already decided that my consent was optional if she expected me to say no. The money I lost became easier to accept after that. Trevor was told to repay the $9,800. I don't know every detail of what happened between him and his parents afterward. I know they stopped treating the transfer like a harmless favor because now other people knew about it. He sent me one message saying he was sorry and that he would return the money to Aubrey as he could. I didn't reply beyond saying the repayment was between him and her now. Janine blamed me for exposing something that should have stayed inside the family. Howard sent one final message telling me that marriage requires sacrifice and that someday I would understand that. I didn't answer. Some mutual friends apologized once they learned the full story. Not all of them did. One still believed I had used money as a weapon and should have given Aubrey more time. Another said I had been right to end the engagement, but wrong to reveal Trevor's transfer in front of other people. I can understand that criticism. If Aubrey and her parents had kept the dispute private, I probably would have kept Trevor's part private too. But once they brought friends into a room to judge me for supposedly destroying a wedding over one joke, I wasn't going to sit there and protect the facts that made their version work. Maybe that was cold. I can live with it. Aubrey and I didn't speak for almost 2 weeks after the family meeting. Then she asked if we could talk once without our parents, friends, or money on the table between us. I agreed. She looked different when I saw her. Not physically exactly, just tired in a way that didn't seem temporary. We sat across from each other at a quiet coffee shop. For the first few minutes, neither of us knew what to say. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry." I waited. She added, "For the dinner. For the messages. For Trevor." It wasn't a polished speech. I appreciated that more than I would have appreciated something rehearsed. Then she said, "You know how my mom gets about appearances." There it was. Not an excuse, exactly. More like the last piece of a habit she hadn't figured out how to put down. "I do," I said. She kept saying people would think they failed me if the wedding looked cheap. Dad kept saying we would figure it out. Trevor called me desperate. I thought I could move the money for a few weeks and put it back. With what? She gave me a tired half-smile with no humor in it. "You." I looked at her. "I know," she said. "That sounds awful." "It sounds accurate." She nodded. "I knew you'd be angry. I knew you'd say no. And I kept telling myself that once we were married, it wouldn't matter because we would be one household anyway. That is exactly why it matters." "I know." We sat there in silence. Then she said something I think was probably the most honest thing she had said during the entire mess. "I think I got used to you fixing things." I said, "So did I." That surprised her. But it was true. Aubrey had a pattern of handing me problems, and I had a pattern of taking them. The arrangement had made me feel useful, sometimes even important. There is a flattering side to being the reliable person. People call you first. They trust you. They tell you they don't know what they would do without you. If you aren't careful, you can start mistaking dependence for respect. I had done that. I told Aubrey I believed she was under pressure. I believed she loved her brother. I believed her mother's obsession with appearances had shaped more of her behavior than she wanted to admit. I also told her none of that changed what she had chosen to do. She looked down at her coffee. "I know." Then she asked, "Is there any version where we start over?" That hurt more than I expected. Part of me wanted to say yes, because 4 years doesn't disappear just because the last month was ugly. But starting over would have required me to believe that the next time my answer mattered, Aubrey would rather hear it than work around it. I didn't believe that anymore. So I told her no. She cried quietly. I did not. Not then. I cried later, at home, when I found the extra blanket she always stole during movie nights folded over the back of the couch. That was the price that had nothing to do with deposits. I wasn't leaving a villain I had never loved. I was leaving a woman I had planned a life with because I no longer trusted the way she understood partnership. That made the right decision feel terrible for a while. Over the next several weeks, the wedding machinery slowly came apart. Some vendors refunded what their contracts allowed. Others kept deposits. Janine had to call relatives and explain that the event was not happening on the original date. A few family members apparently asked why, if Janine and Howard were paying for the wedding, losing my card had mattered so much. I didn't hear those conversations directly. Aubrey told me once that her mother was furious about the questions. That was not my victory. It was just what happens when a story stops being supported by someone else's money. Eventually, Aubrey transferred what remained in the wedding account into the appropriate shares after the outstanding legitimate expenses were handled. We had to go through the account carefully because not every dollar in it had come from the same person. I didn't take money that wasn't mine. I didn't make her reimburse me for every dinner, trip, or favor from our 4 years together. I didn't turn the breakup into an audit of our entire relationship. I paid the last charge that was actually mine under a contract I had signed. Then I removed the wedding account from my banking dashboard and closed out my side of it. The confirmation email came a few minutes later. I saved it. Not because I thought I would need it for a fight, because I wanted one clean record showing that the thing was finished. For years, I thought being the guy who paid on time, showed up, kept his word, and handled problems without drama would eventually make Aubrey's family see me as someone worth respecting. They did see the value in those qualities. They just saw the value differently than I did. To them, my reliability meant there would always be another payment, Another favor, another quiet fix waiting at the end of someone else's bad decision. I still pay on time. I just don't pay to be humiliated. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.